Hello and Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of Truth Unveiled. With me, your host Riaz Ahmed. I hope you enjoyed the previous program and you've learned a lot of information from the previous program as well. At the moment, as you know, the topic for few series, it's going to be Muslim identity. Now, Muslim identity, it is a very important issue that needs to be highlighted and discussed in the media. As we are all aware of the situation in the West and specifically in the United Kingdoms of the Muslim identity, how the Muslim identity is being misrepresented and how the Muslim identity is being demonized, and there are goals to achieve or reasons behind this. For some people, we don't know why this situation has taken place. So we're going to discuss on this in this series as well, and in the future coming series we're going to be discussing on Muslim identity. So to discuss in today's program, I have two guests with me. My first guest is Muhammad Asif. Muhammad Asif is an accountant. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Asif. Is it okay if I call you Asif?
Absolutely.
Asif. And my other honorable guest is Imtiaz Nabi, who is a secondary school science teacher. Imtiaz, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
It is a pleasure to have you gentlemen here.
Thanks very much.
Basically, we're going to start off with the discussion from the beginning. We want you to introduce yourself a little bit more, because all I know about you is that you're an accountant. Just give us a brief introduction about yourself, because I only know you as an accountant. What else you do apart from being an accountant?
Okay, I was born and bred in Pakistan, and I come from the federal areas of Pakistan, and work as an accountant in the city in a small firm that manages hospitality, mainly within hospitality industry. We manage and run and close restaurants. I'm also an entrepreneur, so on weekends and part-time basis I run various educational ventures. I have a couple of schools, supplemental schools that are run in West London that normally cater for students' educational needs for maths, English and science, from reception all the way to GCSE levels. That's the generic idea.
Imtiaz, you are a secondary school science teacher. You're actually teaching in a school where I went almost 40 years ago. And I think a couple of my children have attended that school as well, and you was a teacher of one of my child, which I discovered just recently. Apart from being a science teacher, a Muslim science teacher in a English school, what are your other activities?
There's quite a lot of activities that I am involved in. The idea is to engage the Muslim young and the old people. So to start off with, similar to Asif, we also run an educational centre where we teach English, Maths and Science to the children. Other than that, we run a football club. 4 years ago we started with 10 children. We're now managing approximately 400, and that's 25 11-a-side teams. Each of the teams has a manager who may be the player, the captain, and as young as 13. Through the project we've given them leadership skills, teamwork, and we've got a lot of the boys off the street.
You're into martial arts as well?
We have got a martial arts centre.
Are you into martial arts yourself?
I'm not myself.
Personally, no. You're not a kung fu man.
I'm not a kung fu man.
Okay. and what do you what do you do?
What we have at the centre, we have kung fu, karate, taekwondo, kickboxing, krav maga, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and we've just started women's kickboxing.
Now, all the members of your club, are they only Muslims, or are there non-Muslims, or are the non-Muslims allowed to join your clubs?
I think because of the area where we are, we have a lot of Muslims, a lot of Asians. We're in East London, but we do have non-Muslims there as well.
Brilliant. So this is it's an open door for everyone, not just the Muslims. As you know, we hear on the news, we hear the incidents that take place, anti-Muslim, Islamophobia. There's a lot of that happening, especially in East London, where you're from as well. Just recently, a mosque was attacked. Well, many mosques have been attacked. Many mosques have been bombed. But recently, one of my local mosques in Redbridge, it was attacked, vandalized, and the imam was actually hurled a brick at by anti-Islam organizations, members of the organizations. And Muslim identity has been, as I mentioned in the beginning of the program, it has been misrepresented now, even by the media, the British mainstream media. What would you say that should be done about representing the Muslim identity? Muslims have done a lot in this country. We've been here almost, the presence of Muslims in this country has been for the last 300 years. But most of the general public, members of the general public, in their minds, the Muslims are all terrorists. Muslims are useless. Muslims haven't done anything. They have not, there's no integration between the Muslims and the non-Muslims. So what would be your answer to all these kind of allegations against the Muslims, Imtiaz?
I think one of the things we have to look at is, why do they have this picture of us? You know, in any community there's the good and the bad, and most of the time as human beings I think we do focus on the bad. But what we have to do is we have to promote the good. We have to celebrate the good. So I look at some publications out there like the Email magazine. They're trying to promote what positive projects and people are out there. What are they doing to make a difference? That's just one example. You've now got loads of Muslim channels. These are avenues through which we need to promote what is good about Muslims, because when people see that, then they've got evidence to say, well look, actually not all Muslims are terrorists. There are good people out there.
Asif?
In my view, the leaders of the Islamic belief have to come up and do something about it. In my view, the British media seems to have waged a war completely against Islam. Now, the terrorists, so-called terrorists, were all from Britain, from what I've heard, particularly in relation to the 7/7 incident that BBC did a documentary, etc., etc. Now, in my view, if you're born in Britain, you're English. It doesn't matter where your parents come from. So to say that all Muslims or Asians have become like that, I don't think that's quite right. But what I do think is that the leaders of the Muslim Ummah have to come up and actually start taking an active part in this. How many Muslim leaders do we actually see on BBC or on Channel 4 or Channel 5 come up and actually have a discussion
about it? Are they
about
approached? That's the thing, that are the Muslim leaders approached by the British media? Because what we normally see, the people who are approached, they come from the fanatic organizations,
Yes.
which are very few,
Yeah.
but they're the ones who are given more exposure on the media. What should be done about that?
Well, we do
Because
have,
they don't represent the overall majority
No.
Muslim community.
We do have our own channels now coming up, for example, Channel
But
9
why do you
comes
think
from-
the British media give the chance to those people who are fanatic?
I think perhaps there are some political ambitions behind it or not. I don't want to go into that, but what I do think is that what we can do about us. I don't think this is anything new really, because if you go back to Prophet's times, the Quraysh at the time wouldn't attack anyone of their own. As soon as Prophet Muhammad came, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all of a sudden they're attacking him. They're throwing bricks at him, they're throwing bricks at his friends. So this thing isn't anything new. I think the way to tackle it is by not by just getting outrageous and not by taking out emotional responses. The way would be to actually, if they're not approached, if the conscious leaders aren't approached, I think they should be doing something by themselves. We have our own channels. I think we just ought to be reaching out to people and actually portraying a positive image, which we're not doing at the moment.
There's lack of Muslim. Sorry.
I think one of the things we need to do, we need to build links with the mainstream media, and it's only by building a link with them that they will start to take you seriously. And if we are going to be reserved or stay in the background, and they will go to the ones who are vocal or the extreme element. So we have to build links, we have to invite them into our centres. How many masjids actually open their doors? That's something to think about, you know, that how many times do we invite the local neighbour down and the local newspaper, for example? How many times have we actually carried out functions in our local masjid, for example, and sent the photos and the write-up to the local paper? You know, they will publish, but you've got to, you know, keep persevering. And this, again, as Brother Asif said, the leaders have to start thinking of this.
Okay. But still, there is a voice which is coming from the government sector.
Correct.
Muslims need to integrate. Muslims need to contribute towards the British society. Do you believe that Muslims are not integrating, Muslims are not contributing enough, Muslims are not doing enough? Because this is what we hear all the time. Muslims are not doing enough. Are Muslims doing enough? Are you doing enough, being a Muslim and a Pakistani, living in you're born in Britain as well? Originally, yes, you're Pakistani, but you're born and bred in this country, and you're a teacher. Are you not contributing towards the British society, being a science teacher?
Myself, I mean, I've given you an example of what I'm doing. In the local community, I can see that a lot of the young Muslims who I was working with, initially they were having difficulty accessing knowledge. So as a result, they would have behavior issues. You give them knowledge, you help them with their reading and writing and numeracy, they can start accessing knowledge, and hopefully they'll not misbehave in lessons. They'll achieve well. They achieve well, there's opportunities out there. So that's one example of how we set up our learning centre. Similar with football. Instead of them taking anger out and aggression out physically, you give them a football. They can take out their excess energy in the form of a football game. I think a lot more people need to come forward, because we are still in our closed circles, and it's only by actually seeing people from other communities, making friends with other communities, and they will then speak for you, because when they see that you've got good conduct, good behaviour, I think that's a big selling point for us.
What's your view on this?
I actually think Muslims are integrating quite well. Now, I don't know exactly what David Cameron or the political side of things may want to call integration, but in my view, I work in the city and I see a hell of a lot of Asians, Pakistanis, Muslims working in amazing firms and having senior positions and doing amazing jobs. I personally run a small education centre, and for example, personally, myself, I pay lots of taxes. My organisations pay lots of taxes. I'm an accountant for a number of firms, and they all pay.
So Muslims are economically, they are contributing a lot.
I think they're contributing a lot. All you have to do is to walk into the World Bank, and you'll see the number of Muslims, the number of Asian people there.
The statistics say that there are over 10,000 Muslim millionaires in the UK. So obviously, when you look at these figures, that shows that Muslims are actually contributing in billions. Now, just recent statistics say that 31 billion pounds have been contributed by the Muslims.
Yes.
Now, but then on the other hand, we still hear people moaning and groaning against the Muslims. And then we have this, the fascist organizations like EDL. And the government is not controlling these people. As I mentioned in the beginning of the program, that one of my local mosques was attacked by the members of the EDL. But the government has, okay, they've been imprisoned. But why not control these people from the beginning so the circumstances don't get to such a high extent where people are hurt and the Muslims are being demonized?
I think the comment from the politicians that Muslims aren't integrating is somewhat sort of an oxymoron in my view, because all you have to do is look at the Parliament, the British Parliament, the House of Lords, the number of Pakistani, Asian, Muslim lords there, the number of MPs as well. As far as going, the controlling aspects concerned, I don't think that's going to happen in Britain because of this liberal sort of culture that we have here. Having said that, if there was a group of Muslims who went and attacked a church, you would see the tabloids and the British media going amazingly over the top. So I do agree in that extent. I do think that Muslims are, I wouldn't want to use the word victimized, but I do think that somewhat, we are under pressure. We are brought under pressure. And as a result of that, what it does is, unfortunately for young children, for adults it's not a problem. For young children, the teenagers, when they look at that sort of thing coming up, they sort of divorce themselves from the community, and then they just don't want to be part of it. So I think, if anything, the government's doing itself not enough. It's by making these sort of things, and by comments, and by not controlling, or by not having a view on EDL and that sort of organisation. I think they are causing the youngsters, the Asian Muslim youngsters, to sort of divorce away from the society.
Do you believe anything to add to what Asif has said?
I mean, one of the things I will say is, with a lot of the members of EDL, how educated are they? And again, it comes down to building links with people of that nature. If they haven't experienced a dialogue, or
who needs to experience dialogue with the EDL? I mean, what we're saying is that should the government do something about the EDL? Should they disarm this kind of an organisation?
I think if you actually put pressure, it will go underground. And so, for example, in Oldham, where the riots happened, what did they do? They found that certain pockets of communities weren't interacting. So it's about trying to get through to them from a young age. And the schools, that's where they started tackling issues like this, racism, etc. So this is where you have to educate the people. And sometimes people do things because they're ignorant.
Sure. There are certain elements amongst the Muslim community who are, as we said in the beginning, that they are fanatics or extremists, but then in overall majority there is an anger amongst the Muslims as well, and I think that is because of the invasion of the Muslim countries. For instance, invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, and now Pakistan is being targeted. Just a few days ago, a Pakistani army has been bombed by NATO, although they are allies against the in the war against terror, but still the Pakistani soldiers have been, almost 25 Pakistani soldiers have been attacked. Now, the Pakistani Muslims living in the UK, how would they feel when they hear news like this?
Certainly, this is exactly my point. The government, the policies, etc., they're alienating the population itself by doing this sort of activity. Again, I don't know whether there are political motives or what exactly what's behind it. But to talk about, the topic that we have today is obviously about the integration, about that sort of thing. And when these things happen, the integration sort of breaks off, because how would you feel? How would Britain feel if somebody from Pakistan came along and bombed a border here? It won't be very good. And I think it's this thing, but again it comes back to my issue earlier, that our leaders, our politicians, have to actually raise a positive voice.
So you're saying that the Muslim politicians in the UK, they have not done enough. What would you say to that, Imtiaz?
I think the Muslim politicians, sometimes they are, they hand the tide with how much they can do. They work very hard to get to that position, but sometimes the system is such that they're not able to do much. And I'm sorry to say, I've seen that in local council as well. But I mean, I was going to come back to something you just touched upon, and that is, does the EDL have anger as well? If we as Muslims have anger when our brethren are killed, does the EDL have anger as well towards Muslims? That's the question we need to ask.
Do they? Does the EDL have anger towards Muslims? But for what reason would the EDL have anger towards Muslims?
I think it's all to do, in my view, about confusion. The problem here is terrorism and Islam. Right now, the media, the politicians, our own politicians and our own leaders as well, because by way of not them by the way of not them doing much, it's become an issue, in a way that, in every culture, in every religion, you look at Judaism, you look at Christianity, you look at Islam, you'll always have a faction that sort of breaks away from the shackles, or breaks away from the basic teachings, which is peace, not hating, but actually loving, and all that sort of thing. EDL is one such example, and I guess the point I'm trying to make is that Islam and terrorism aren't the same thing. They're very different.
Haters have always been there. Before 9/11 or 7/7 or the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, and all this hatred which has been fed into the mind of the people. There were fascist, racist organizations such as National Front before, and now the BNP as well as the EDL. So, I mean, why is the British government giving these kind of organizations so much chance to create problem in the society?
I guess if you were to go to speak to EDL, a member from EDL, their answer would be, what about the Crusaders against Christianity? What about those guys? I mean, that's a small faction within, unfortunately, the Muslims that has come about. So that sort of thing. The
Crusaders were the Christians,
yes,
who waged crusade against the Muslims.
Exactly, at the time. But I think our leaders...
So are they actually following the policies of the Crusaders?
I don't know whose policies they're following, but all that I know is that if you were to speak to EDL, they'll probably say something about that. So anger, yes, I think, and the anger because of confusion, because they see terrorism and Islam as exactly the same thing, when it's not. Basic teachings of Islam is that you do not kill somebody.
Now, yourself, Imtiaz, you as well as being a school teacher, a school science teacher, I must emphasize on this, because we hear that the Muslims, they don't know anything, they're uneducated people, but alhamdulillah, we have a science teacher here, we have an accountant here. In the previous programs we had intellectuals as well, and there are millions out there in all kind of special fields. There are Muslims, there are bankers, there are accountants, there are millionaires, and there are billionaire Muslims as well who are contributing to the British society. But yourself, you are as well as active in a lot of other activities, sports. You're doing a lot of dawah work, introducing people to Islam. How do you do that? And what do you, if you meet a non-Muslim person, how would you introduce Islam to that non-Muslim person? What does Islam teach? What message does Islam give to the rest of the human community?
I think the best way to introduce somebody to Islam is through your behavior. And through the various projects that we run, we emphasize good manners, control, self-control, respect for other people. And I mean, we've seen this by working with non-Muslims and Muslims, because they also need dawah as well. Shaking hand with them, reminding them, especially football is a very active game, very physical game, and sometimes tempers can flare up. And where a person can keep self-control, I think we've achieved our objective. So a lot of our football teams, they know the expectation that if you swear, if you get involved in violence, it will not be tolerated. So alhamdulillah, I will say...
Do you keep a swear box?
We don't, but alhamdulillah, we do emphasize it, and if they are excessive, then they have to go to the sin bin or something like that. But we've seen changes in people by modelling it ourselves.
Brilliant. And do you ever force any non-Muslim to accept Islam? No, because there is a great number of conversion in Europe, but in the UK there's a great number of conversion, non-Muslims converting to Islam. I just mentioned this because what we hear is that Muslims have forced other nations or other religions to convert to Islam. But alhamdulillah, we can see here in this country hundreds and thousands of people have converted to Islam without any kind of a force.
Yeah. It's a conscious decision that people make. I was just sort of going to follow up on the just point that Imtiaz made, is that I personally work in the school venture that I do on the weekends. I worked with a couple of non-Muslim people. One of them based up in the north of England. He happens to be our academic director for the organisation, and he doesn't believe in God as such, but he does follow the Christianity religion. Atheist.
Right.
But he does say that if he were to choose a religion, he would be Muslim, because he has seen the behavior, the way we talk, the honesty in the business. I think all of these things, convey a very deep message. And that's exactly what Prophet did at his time. It's no different. You always convert people by the behavior, not by force.
What about the system in Islam? There's a financial system, there's an economical system, there is all kinds of system in Islam. And how do people find, when you discuss with them, non-Muslims, do you put forward the Islamic systems as well, introduce them to the Islamic system?
Yes, I mean, we discussed them. Unfortunately, the company that I work in the city isn't sort of based on that sort of principles, but wherever we can, particularly in my own organization or the businesses that I run, that's exactly the method we adopt. We stray away from the interest bits. And when you actually engage in a discussion about interest particularly, you see that a lot of non-Muslims actually see to it and they understand where exactly Islam comes from when it talks about no interest, for instance. So yeah, no, absolutely, it is, and I'm very pleased to see these days that nearly every UK bank offers a Sharia sort of banking and Islamic banking. There's Sharia legal system available as well in Britain. So I think when people talk about Muslims not integrating, I don't quite agree with that, because there's all these things. Why would a bank offer an Islamic banking if Muslims weren't integrating? I don't understand that.
Imtiaz, as Asif has just mentioned, the Islamic banking, it is different from the conventional banking. As he mentioned, it's about the interest, because according to our understanding, there is no interest charges or interest rates according to the Islamic banking system, or in the Islamic banking system. And what do you think, as what Asif has just said? Do you have anything to add to?
Yeah, I mean, I talk to a lot of young people, and they're discovering about the Deen, and interest is something that they feel is something they don't want. They want the money to be clean. And so a lot of them are moving away from, let's say, the high street banks and having accounts with the Islamic Bank of Britain, for example. That is really amazing for me, that they're actually thinking on that level. But
now, the non-Muslims, when you tell the non-Muslims the Islamic banking system, what would be their reaction when you say there's no interest in Islamic banking? Because the people I discuss with, especially online, on Facebook and on other social medias, what the reaction we get is, oh, well, if there is no interest, then the nation will not survive, because their mentality is that without interest you cannot survive. What would you say to that?
A number of years ago there was no interest concept in Britain either. The banking system, all the way that at the time the transactions used to take place.
But then they would say that this is why there were a lot of poverty, and now that poverty is not there anymore because of interest.
That poverty has also led to an absolute economic meltdown right now, and it's all to do with this. It's artificial money, because this doesn't exist. Interest is based on something that's not real, in my view. And as a result, when there is no underlying asset to justify that, unfortunately, you will keep having these economic meltdowns. You see, every 20, 25, 30 years, I don't understand why nobody sort of picked up on this issue so far. That why does after every 20, 30 years, there's some sort of an economic meltdown in the Western world?
On one hand, we see anti-Islamic slogans, but then on the other hand, by the same politicians, which I would call it being two-faced. In 2005, which was much later, after 9/11, Gordon Brown, he praised the huge contribution that Muslim community makes to the British society, culture and prosperity. But then why do these politicians, when they're amongst the Muslims, this is what he said when there was a Muslim gathering, and this is what he said, that he's quite amazed that Muslims have progressed a lot, and they've given a lot, they've contributed a lot to the British society, they've given a culture to the British society. But then when they get to a certain stage, they change. Then we hear from the same people, Muslims are not contributing enough, Muslims are not integrating. So what would you say to people like that?
I mean, the only thing I have to say is that you don't need to look very far. Just look at the sort of so-called Britain's national sort of dish that they eat. It's curry. I mean,
yes.
There are quite clearly a number of curry houses, number of restaurants that actually integrate, hence why you have sort of this much delicious food, and the liking for Asian food. But I guess it's, within the politics, you always find this thing. I personally think that in 2005, just when the 7/7 happened, at the time the politicians said, well, Muslims do contribute a lot to the society. I don't think any Muslims are involved. A couple of weeks later, the tabloids were full of Muslims are terrorists, Muslims are this, Muslims are that. So, unfortunately, I don't personally think or believe that the politicians will say to the media, actually, don't do this. I think it's up to us really how we proceed.
Well, isn't it the government's responsibility when certain community is being demonized by the media? Then shouldn't the government put a stop to it?
Government absolutely must try to put a stop to it, and I think it's in their own interest. A lot more than what they think at the moment. There's over 2 million Muslims. In a couple of decades, that's going to treble. Of course it will, because most of this, the statistics are that most of the most of the Muslims are young at the moment, under the age of 25, as opposed to over 50, 60. So quite clearly, this number is meant to increase as these people marry and they have their own families and so on. And I think the government has to sort of try to think rationally about this. They need to stop having any political motives about it. There isn't Islam or Britain or Christianity. When you're talking about Britain, you're talking about the country Britain. You're not talking about the religion. You're not talking about the terrorists. We all live here. If they want us to integrate, and then the media or the politicians themselves, if they make comments like that, unfortunately, that will alienate people. That will alienate young people.
Imtiaz, being a science teacher, and as the Muslims are actually, almost all Muslims are being looked upon as terrorists, would you feel trusted, would you be trusted handling the chemicals while you are teaching science in the school?
Yeah, I think that there's no problem with that at all. I think one of the things you have to do, you have to build a good relationship, a rapport with anybody you work with, be it with Muslims or non-Muslims. And if you have faith and you have taqwa, things will work out. But I think it's human nature sometimes for us to always focus on the negative. You can look at the newspapers; they will always look for gossip, anybody to demonize. And I think we just got to be actively working hard to promote the good values of Islam.
Have you ever faced any discrimination by the people you work amongst, the non-Muslims that you work with?
I would say, alhamdulillah, I have never have, and I've always conducted myself in a nice manner. And we have a motto in our school: treat other people as you wish to be treated. And I think that's an Islamic value.
What about yourself?
I think I absolutely agree. It's the way you carry yourself is how it's a give and take process.
Have you ever faced any discrimination?
No, I haven't.
In kind? No, that is brilliant. That's very good news, and I'm really glad that people like yourself, you're professionals, you're from different fields. You're an accountant, you are a teacher. What would be your message to the haters of Islam and the haters of Muslims? How would you try and make them change their mind or their thinking towards Muslims and towards Islam? Imtiaz.
Islam means peace, and I think if you want to change somebody, you've got to change yourself first.
Say you have changed yourself. You're a very polite person, you're a very intelligent person, but then there are still people out there who don't like you for being a Muslim. So to people like that, how would you encounter those kind of people?
If somebody is being angry towards me and I start becoming angry towards them, there's no difference between us two. I have to have beautiful dialogue, beautiful speech, I have to be patient, my facial expressions have to be gentle, and the other person, inshallah, with time, will realize that they're doing wrong, and then you can start reasoning with them.
Is that what it takes to change a person's mind from a very great hater? Then you do certain actions which is not violence, then that can change a person's mind towards you?
I certainly agree with that. I mean, I personally try to live my life with the fact that if ever you're encountered with a certain situation, I try to think, well, what if Prophet Muhammad was in this instance? What would he do? And the lady, a very famous, story that a very famous lady, a lady who used to drop
A famous
rubbish.
incident,
Who used to drop rubbish
garbage
on
the
and
Prophet.
he just looked up and smiled, and
Yes,
few
but
weeks
then,
later,
then there
it
was...
changed.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was saying a few weeks later, her attitude changed, particularly when she was ill, and he actually still came to look after her. I think it's really, as I said earlier, that the leaders have to sort of raise somewhat voice. They have to raise, encourage. At the moment, the problem is all about confusion. People don't understand. You can have a fantastic behavior. You'll probably get good behavior in return, but that confusion about Islam will still be in their minds. Unfortunately, just by behavior, that isn't going to go away. It will go away by dialogue. It will go away by leaders actually stepping up and having a discussion, and coming on mainstream media and doing something about it.
On the other hand, would you feel, like some people do, they feel that it is actually the non-Muslims not integrating with the Muslims? They want to keep apart from the Muslims. Do you think that they need to give a chance to the Muslims as well?
I think over here we will need to look at what do we mean by integration, because if by integration you're meaning that we actually adapt their culture, unfortunately that won't happen, because the very basic principles of Islam won't allow you to do that. For instance, you're not going to go into a club, you're not going to get into a pub and sit with them and have a drink. So what do you mean by integration? I think this is where I keep sort of stressing the point that it's about clearing the concept. Islam isn't about terrorism. Islam is about peace. And once people understand it, at my workplace, it's a fantastic example. I carry a very good behavior. You do your job honestly. You do everything that's right. You pay your taxes. And I think wherever possible, where people have a dialogue with you, you have a dialogue back with them. Only a dialogue, a constructive dialogue,
Sure.
and you will see a change.
Sure. Imtiaz, what is the limit of integration? As Asif has said, that obviously you cannot go to a nightclub with a person who's a non-Muslim, because your religion doesn't allow you to go to a nightclub or go to a pub or a bar. But then how will you have a dialogue with that person? What would be the way to get closer to those people? For instance, if you meet a person, you become friend with a Christian person, you need to sit down somewhere a few times a week and have a dialogue. Then the person would say to you, well, you'll have to come to the pub, because after work I go to the pub and that's the only place that I can meet you. What would you say to that kind of situation?
I think you have to look at every scenario differently, and by having a dialogue, it doesn't mean you have to go to the pub. You have to find alternatives. Maybe the local coffee place or the canteen in the workplace. There are other places to go down. Maybe even invite them to your house. Sure. There are opportunities, and as a member of staff, I have invited people to my house. We've had good dialogue. We've even opened up at one time an interfaith dialogue where every fortnight we were having a chat and having a shared lunch. So this is another avenue. So
the interfaith dialogue, what was the outcome of that interfaith dialogue? Is it still going, or is it just happened a couple of times?
It kind of fizzled out, but at the time it was very good, because staff were able to just once every fortnight bring their own food and share something, and just develop an affection for each other.
Anything to add to what Imtiaz said?
Yes, no, I absolutely agree. I have a number of colleagues with me who, during the month of Ramadan, actually fast with me. Even though they're not
actually
Muslims.
fast with you?
They actually fast with me. Not for the reason, not obviously the purpose of doing it is probably different, but
for
they
a
are
diet
fasting.
person,
Exactly, but they are
probably
actually
to lose weight.
Perhaps, but they're actually doing that with me. Now that tells you that actually when you actually try to explain that actually by fasting you're not killing yourself, these are the reasons behind it.
Where drinking alcohol, you'd be killing yourself. So if they say the same to you, well, we fasted with you all through the month of Ramadan. Now you'll have to come to a pub or a club with us.
I have been faced with such a situation, and my answer to them is always, look, I respect your religion, you ought to respect mine. I don't mind you having a drink.
Well, this is not a religion, it's a culture kind of a thing, because Christianity doesn't teach to go to the pub or a club or to the bar.
Understood.
This is just a British culture. It's nothing to do with Christianity. Where we hear people that Britain is a Christian country, which is not really a Christian country, because we don't see any Christianism in the culture.
Yeah. Be as it may, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that My answer to that person is, I don't mind you having a drink. If you need to have it, by all means, but can we meet in a different place? I can have coffee, you can have your drink, absolutely fine by me.
And what are your future plans for those football teams that you are working with, your club? What will people achieve from there? For instance, you have kickboxers. You're managing a kickboxing team, you're managing a karate team, a kung fu team, and a football team. Then what will be their future? Would you think that any one of those students of yours will become professionals?
I think with the martial arts centre, every instructor has his own vision, and some of them are moving on to better clubs and going on to competing. With regard to the football, we started 5-a-side, we've now stepped into 11-a-side. The aim is to become a semi-professional club in a few years' time. So I think you have to keep on persevering.
And what age do they start from?
We start from the age of about 8.
About 8 too.
And we've got men's team as well. So.
And what about your weekend education centre that you run? What is the education there? What do you teach?
Well, it's all about English, maths and science, the basic sort of hardcore subjects. We have children ranging from reception all the way to GCSE. It's normally group education. But
can you imagine, you just mentioned English, science and maths, and those who have negative view about the Muslims, they would say, what, a Muslim teaching science and maths and English?
And what's amazing is that at our centre, most of the teachers are Muslims, but we also, it's a multicultural sort of thing. We have some teachers from the Arab world, we also have a couple of English guys, and I think it all works fantastic. It's amazing. We have over 200 children from all different races, religions and nationalities. And
what is your message out there to the Islamophobics?
I think all I'll have to say is that don't just take it on face value. Try and understand what Islam is. I remember having a discussion with a colleague of mine back when that Pastor Terry from America tried to burn Quran, and I had a lot of Muslim friends getting very anguished about it and angry about it. And I said to them, Islam isn't about that. This person is quite clearly trying to is trying to encourage an emotional response, and I think we just have to look. Islam's all about peace. Islam's all about loving, and
Imtiaz.
I think everybody knows Islam means peace, but I feel that we need to demonstrate it more. We are living in the UK, and it's not our country in some ways, although we're born here and we've got the
I think it's my country. I think it's my country. My children think it's their country.
So if it is our country,
because we have actually contributed, and we are established here now. This is our 4th generation in this country. So obviously this is my country. Pakistan is not my country anymore. Pakistan is a second home for me. But my first home is the UK.
So I will still add, if this is our country, we need to work even more harder to negate the thought processes of those who are anti-Islam. And I think we can do it if we are active. But if we allow the extreme element to win, then they will have that picture, yes, all Muslims are terrorists.
There are over 2 million Muslims in the UK, and there is a huge contribution, economical contribution towards the British society by the Muslims. Just recent statistics will tell you that £31 billion have been contributed by the Muslims to the British economy. There are over 10,000 Muslim millionaires who are contributing towards the British society. Muslims have given a culture not just to the British but to the entire world. We can see there are signs in the Western, in the European countries where Muslims have introduced new kind of things. Muslims have introduced new science. Now, Muslims were the one who actually invented coffee. Muslims were the ones who invented the check that we've been using for centuries before the plastic card system came out. It was the checks that we used to issue. Now that was introduced by Muslims, and many more things, inshallah, we will mention all these things to you in the future programs. Until then, you take good care of yourself, look after people around you, and spread peace. Assalamu alaikum and goodbye for now.